This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's show. Before I jump into the Comedy Roundtable with two tremendous stand-up comics, I want to explain that Jackie had a bad phone connection for about the first 7 minutes, 8 minutes of the podcast. Please be patient with it. He figures it out, and the balance of the podcast, everything is clear and easy to understand. So for the first 6 to 8 minutes of the podcast, please be patient with the connection with Jackie. Okay, here comes our special show, a Comedy Roundtable. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show, and we have another terrific roundtable. That's a Comedy Roundtable featuring stand-up comics here. We have two terrific guys. They've both got a history in stand-up comedy, and lately got together as a team to do a terrific podcast called Standup Memories. But let's get him on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, first up, he's known as the Professor. He appeared as a comic around clubs all over the country, done a lot of corporate. You've seen him on TV. And he is a teacher. He went into teaching history in American government in New York, and it's just exciting to have him on the show. Let's welcome Peter Bales.
Wow! Right. How'd you get right? I'm happy to be here, Scott. It is so nice to talk to you. And please tell all your listeners there will be a quiz after this.
Well, that's perfect from a teacher. But also joining us on the round table, Jackie the Joke Man Martling. This guy has done comedy. He's done an actor, an author, a singer. He's done it all. He was really the exciting thing, the head writer for the Howard Stern show. He's performed all over the country, and he's known as the Joke Man, which we're going to have to test him on. But let's welcome to the show, Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Yeah. Scott. Thank you, Scott. My pleasure to be here like this. I got so many things to do on a Tuesday morning.
Well, we're all in that kind of semi-retired state, and I thought it was so exciting that you guys got together to do this podcast, and I've listened to a few of your shows, and it just got my juices going. We've had kind of similar past, except you were the talent and I was the producer, but we've gone through the same ages, or let's say generations of stand-up comedy. But let's jump into this. Jackie, how did you kind of start getting into stand-up comedy? What was your start?
By default, I was a musician my whole life, and I told jokes and played my original songs. And by the time I got to the 70s, I was, instead of covers, we're playing original songs, and I was telling jokes because I had amassed probably the hugest volume of jokes in anybody's head ever. And at the ripe old age of 30, I decided if I ever want to eat or buy a house or do anything, I better quit music because I sucked at it. And so really intelligent, I quit music and became a comedian, which is certainly frying pan into the fire. But, I love stealing Rodney's jokes. When I quit music, to give you an idea how well I was doing, I was the only one who knew I quit.
Well, that's funny.
And then I just started telling my jokes on stage, and I figured I'd give it a shot, and I started telling jokes on stage, and then I made an album, and I never looked back. Just every 6 months, I made more than the 6 months before, and that held true till 2001 when I left the show, and that's when my accountant told me that he told me I did a 9/11 on my bank account. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, you've had a lot of success. I mean, more than a comic. You were on radio. You've done some acting. You've authored a book. You've written some songs. But I think the thing that stuck out was being the head writer for the Howard Stern show. Was that something that was difficult or fun?
It was a job I created. The genesis of it is kind of not even believable. I used to send all my stuff, my CD. I used to send cassettes and tapes and promo all over the world when I was first starting out in 1979. And by 1982, I had 3 comedy albums out, like actual LPs, wax LPs. And I heard about this guy that was coming from New York, and I didn't listen to the radio. I knew nothing until my albums to him. And Howard called me up, and I went in and sat on the show. And at the end of the day, he said, "You're fun. Why don't you come back next week?" So I came back once a week for 3 years for free. And then we went to mornings, and along the way, I started passing him ideas and notes, and we just became an actual powerhouse. We were Abbott and Costello, just only Costello was taking the bows. So I was, it's funny because I have a great laugh, and I'm a good target, and I'm fun. So that almost gave me plenty of reason to be sitting in that studio for the most part. So to this day, so many people have no idea the extent that I was feeding Howard lines. But, they syndicated, and we just went to Pluto. Every couple of years it was 5 more stations, 10 more stations. But there was never a day that wasn't fun. I mean, I didn't quit that show because I wasn't having fun. I mean, we'd sit there and laugh 4 or 5 hours. I was the kid sitting in the back of the classroom, passing notes. But not only was I getting encouraged to pass notes, I was getting paid really well for it. It was like a ridiculous job that I had, Scott, if I'm sitting here talking to you and Peter's talking to you and I'm not supposed to be talking and you're having a conversation with Peter and I think of something funny to say, instead of saying it, I would write it down and put it in front of you. So now you have your sense of humor and my sense of humor. And it just made Howard a powerhouse, So, I mean, he's a funny guy anyway, but everybody can use a little, a leg up. So, it was just, it just came together ridiculously. But yeah, it was, to answer your question, it couldn't have been more fun. And no pressure. The pressure was from each other, breaking each other's balls. But there's no pressure from trying to be funny.
Right. No, you found that gift in life that is just so important, and that is doing something that makes you a living and you can enjoy it. Well, Peter, how did you end up in stand-up comedy? Because I know that you had a lot of success, did a lot of TV, you traveled all over the country, but you ended up being a teacher, which is, I've actually had several teachers that became comics and made a career, but you kind of went the other route. How did you start off in stand-up comedy?
Actually, I've always done the two things pretty much simultaneously, because it's always been my goal to be ineffective in 2 things rather than 1. But asking me how I got into comedy, I always tell people that when I was very, very young, I was scared by a serious person and wanted to compensate for that. Actually, the truth is, I enjoyed being in plays when I was in high school. I loved the attention. I loved the feeling of there's a show tonight. And I actually was a serious theater student at Northwestern University and found very quickly I couldn't act at all, except that I was funny and I could play myself. And I took workshops in Chicago at Second City, and the rest is history. Graduated from Northwestern, came home, auditioned at the Comic Strip Comedy Club in New York City, and then never looked back.
You were there in the heyday of the comic.
I was in the heyday of the Comic Strip. The person who passed me on my audition was Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, wow. What year was that?
Said, probably 1979. 1979.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I opened my comedy clubs in 1980, and Jerry was one of my first regulars. Him and Larry Miller, Paul Reiser, the Mark Schiff, the funniest men in the universe out of New York. I know all those guys.
I started with all of those guys and hung out with them, and before anybody knew anybody. It was quite an experience.
Yeah, that was really a fun soup of entertainment or talent pool to be a part of, Peter. Do you remember any of your early jokes or bits? What was your genre? What did you enjoy poking fun at as a comic?
Well, I can tell you this. Jerry always used to say that his biggest influence was the same as mine, and that's Robert Klein. Both of us memorized his Child of the 50s album. And I was not observational like Jerry. I was talking about myself. I. Here I am. This is me in a funny situation. And that's what I believe comedy is. Funny people in funny situations. And hopefully that funny person is you, because you're the comedian. That's the kind of comedy I do. And it's terrific. I get a chance now. I have a comedy class on Long Island where I live, where we help new people, new young people mostly, get started in stand-up comedy, get their first 5-6 minutes. And my philosophy is Seinfeldian. And he really, really looked deeply into comedy, every little thing. And he was mentoring me. He didn't know he was mentoring me, but I was mentored by Jerry Seinfeld.
Well, you couldn't ask for a better teacher. He is one of those gifted people that can, through observational comedy, take in almost any situation we all run into as human beings, find the funny in it. And what's always been impressive to me was that he was always able to keep it so clean. And that's one of the reasons for his huge success. Jackie, you were considered the joke master. Do you remember any of your early bits or jokes? What was your type of comedy?
Well, I was a joke teller. That's what I did in my band. I played in a band. The guys finally quit. You know, they because I was the jokes and I was writing all the songs, and it was really funny. We were in a 3-man band, and one night in late '78, we were in the back room, and the beer. We called it the dressing room, but it was where they kept the beer. And they said, "Jackie, we're gonna leave the band and start our own band." And I said, "Listen, you morons." He said, "I'm no rocket scientist, but if there's 3 guys in a band and 2 guys leave the band to start their own band, that's kicking me out of the band." But I started telling jokes, but I also was doing stand-up kind of stuff, you know, and stupid stuff, you know, about your family. You know, it's funny, I was just listening to one of my old albums the other night. You know, when I was a kid, my father used to pull me through the snow. I wish we had a sled. You know that kind of.
Well, that's funny.
You know, they built me a swing next to a wall. You know, it's really goofy stuff. And I also played the guitar and did parodies. And then at some point I said that, you know, I just want to tell my jokes. That's what I know how to do, and that's what I enjoy. You know, I was named the Joke Man. You know, it's a whole long story. If people are interested, they really should get my book, because it just is boring. But I was named the Joke Man by Rick Dees, who was the #1 disc jockey in Los Angeles. And he had gotten a hold of my Dirty Joke line. I started a Dirty Joke line in 1979 when we first started comedy on Long Island, because we had no way to promote the shows. So I got a phone number, 516-922-WINE, and people call and hear a dirty joke, and then hey, tonight we're at Cinnamon in Huntington, and it got really popular and really crazy, and it got to Rick Dees, and he started calling it from Los Angeles. But, you know, you have to be old. You will be old enough to remember this. Like 78, 79, like in 1978, there was no such thing as video, and by 1980, everybody had a video player. Everything loosened up. Nothing was dirty on television. And then all of a sudden HBO came, and all of a sudden you're sitting there with your mother and there's bare boobs on television. And the world loosened up. So my dirty joke line got dirty. It wasn't really dirty, but it got dirtier. And Rick Dees called me up and said, "Jackie, I've been stealing your jokes and playing them on my national top 40 countdown, but now the jokes are all too dirty. Will you do some jokes especially for me?" And I said, "All right." And he said, "All right, we'll call you Jackie the Joke Man Martling, the guy from New York that knows all the jokes." I said, "Sounds good to me." And of course, the whole world thought it was Howard that named me the Joke Man. And meanwhile, if the guy was completely 180 degrees, Howard was so dark, and Rick Dees was like bubbly and white bread. And he paid me, and I did jokes for him, and I've been the Joke Man ever since. It's kind of interesting, you know.
Well, that shows pure talent, though, Jackie, that you were able to write for both types of personalities. I've interviewed a few television writers and comedy writers, and they were saying that most of them find it easy to write for other people. as opposed to writing for themselves. And of course, stand-up comics know that it's not easy to write for yourself. But Jackie, is there a quick joke that you keep in your holster?
Well, I got millions of jokes in my holster. Where are we going with it? You know, I'll tell you a joke that we just did on the show the other day. There's an old guy that needs an operation and he can't afford it. And his son comes over and says to his mother, "Hey, Mom, there's a new show on TV called Medic. And they'll operate on Pop for free if he can do it on TV." And she says, "Oh, I don't know." He says, No, let me get the producer. You'll be glad." And the producer comes over and says, "Yeah, Mr. Chiavelli, we'll take your husband and operate on television." She said, "But I can't go. I got nothing to wear. I got nothing." He said, No, we'll get you a nice dress. Yeah, no, I can't get it done. No, we'll get you a nice dress. We'll get you a limousine. We'll put you up in a nice hotel. It'll be really great. So they agree. The limo comes and picks up the old lady and her husband, and they go to the studio. They wheel the husband into the set, which is just a big TV set, but they're actually doing the operation. And she's in the green room, you know, sitting at the table with the lights all around, like a makeup table, and then making her up. And she's spraying on perfume. She got on a brand new dress. And then the producer walks into the green room and he says, "Mrs. Chiavelli, I have some unfortunate news. Your husband passed away during the operation." And she says, "That's the showbiz."
All right. We got to give
That's
that something. Yeah.
That's a classic.
And that's the guy, you know, and that's what I tell great old jokes, you know, and I really love them. You know, like I get pretty dirty, but I can do it without getting pretty dirty. I got 6 CDs out that are now, my God, I'm sure they'll take me to jail because forget about politically correct. You know, it's like I took politically correct and lived under it. Yeah, but yeah, you know?
I think we could do a whole show on what's changed. It's so funny. I posed a question recently to an audience. Is it comedy that's changed or the audience? And I think that the world swung really far the wrong way in this whole woke thing and everything. And now I think it's swinging back. But like I said, that could be another show. Peter, you were in show business quite a while. Do you have any really good or kind of scary road stories? You know, something about your industry?
Oh my goodness. This is so much fun. This is why our podcast is called Standup Memories, because this is what we do. You know, we're going back to the 80s, even the very late 70s. And this is so much fun. What you're touching on now is the difference between comedy material and jokes. Jackie is the joke man. And, you know, I do comedy material about myself. And you're right, it is tough to write. It is very tough to write about yourself. And I was remembering when I was starting out at the comic strip, I was working on a bit that was about me being 24 years old, going to the bank, having $15 in my account, and I'm there to take out $5. And the bank teller decides to make fun of me. But I was struggling with the punchline. I couldn't get the punchline. And we used to bounce jokes off each other at the bar at the comic strip. And Jerry Seinfeld came up with the punchline because he had gone across the street to a bagel store on a Sunday night, and he waited online like 25 minutes to buy one bagel. And he gets to the cashier, buys his one bagel, and the cashier looks at him and says, "You having a party?" and he said,
I remember seeing Peter do that joke the first time I ever saw him. It was it's so clear because it's so funny, you know.
Well, that's what the bank teller said to me in my joke. You know, you want to take out $5? You have 15. You having a party? That joke worked every night for many years. But then it stopped working for the simple reason that when you're 35 years old, it doesn't make any sense. It's not believable at all that a 35-year-old has $15 in his account. It worked when I was in my 20s, but not, you age out of it. But that's how comedy works. And like I always say, the comedian doesn't decide what's funny. The audience decides what's funny. And you're absolutely right about how the audience has changed over the decades.
You know, Peter is so white bread clean, but now people are so out of their minds about everything. He has a great joke in his act. And I've been meaning to ask him about this because I haven't heard it lately. And it's probably because in today's world, it's probably too mean. But he was in Little League and he's playing second base. He hit the ball and it went between his legs. And his father stood up and yelled, "You were adopted." which is so funny. But nowadays it's like, oh, how many people are dancing that? You know? Jesus Christ.
I gotta bring that one back. I definitely gotta bring that one back.
Oh God, it's so funny. We're both from Long Island. So there were jokes he did from Long Island, like, because, you know, we're all, if you're a poor kid from Long Island, you're surrounded by so many rich people. And Peter said he actually had a friend with a pool, and he would put on flippers and his bathing suit and a snorkel and knock on the door. And when the kid answered, he'd say, "What do you want to do today?" Which is just right. But if you're not a poor kid from Long Island, I'm not sure if that flies, you know.
Actually, I that joke still works. That joke still, I got to bring that one back too.
What do you want to do today?
I love this stuff. Hey, man, what do you feel?
Bales' act better than I know mine.
No, we love the stand-up memories. That's why we call our podcast Stand-Up Memories. The road is tough. Scott, you know this. The road can be incredibly tough. And, that's a young man's game. I'll tell you, I don't think I could really become a road comic again. But we've all been through the trials and tribulations. Most shows, like 99% of comedy shows, are wonderful fun. But that 1% when something goes wrong, that's what comedians like to talk about when we go to the diner together.
Right. You end up in the corner of a restaurant with no stage, no lighting, no sound system. They go, "Okay, be funny."
Yeah. And before you start, turn off the Stanley Cup playoffs. See, that'll make the crack.
That's so true. Well, Jackie, you've had an incredible career, and you shared your great story about working with Howard Stern, but you did a lot of comedy and have worked a lot of stages. Any really upbeat, funny, or scary, terrible stories about being on the road? Did you have any experiences that stuck with you?
You know, of course. It's so funny because they're so countless. I used to do a podcast with a guy the other day called the legendary Wid, who's a guy I met in Philadelphia, and we were telling so many great stories. But this didn't happen to me, but there was a fantastic comedian named Dennis Wolfberg. You probably worked with him.
Oh, Dennis was one of my favorite regulars and one of the nicest men in show business. It was a huge loss when he passed. Both him and his wife had worked for me back in the day. But thanks for mentioning Dennis. Everybody pay attention. Dennis Wolfberg, if you can find his material on YouTube, one of the funniest guys, and a guy that was a teacher turned comic. Go ahead, Jackie.
That's my story, Bales, and I'm telling it. You're not telling it.
Oh, wait a second. We both have a great story. Scott,
there was a place in Philadelphia, Comedy Works, that was on the third floor above a Middle East restaurant, and you literally had you didn't want to go through the whole big showroom if you wanted to go to the bathroom, so you go down the back stairs, and the bathroom was on the second floor. You literally had to walk through this long room that was the dining room, and they had a belly dancer. You literally would walk in front of a belly dancer to go take a leak. It was hysterical. And the stage on the third floor was like a makeshift stage, kind of like high school risers. And they built like a faux wall, like a fake wall with an opening doorway. And they had a piano player. And Wolfberg ended every one of his shows with "Bye Bye American Pie." I mean, the comics would like put pins in their eyes that would drive us all. But the piano player, along with Dennis on this song, and the piano player was blind, and everybody knew he was blind. But Wolfberg brings down the house with this song, and then he's supposed to walk off stage, and obviously he's going to walk off stage with the piano player. but the people are screaming and clapping, and he's euphoric. He's not using his head, and him and the piano player walking side by side. Wolfberg walked through the doorway, and just like the Three Stooges, the blind piano player walked into the wall. Oh my God! It was show-stoppingly, and the story grows over the years. But somebody told me that the piano player's parents were actually in the crowd because they were always there, which is just right. But me and Bales and Wolfberg went to do a show in Jersey at one of the ground rounds. And my car broke down on the way.
We played at ground rounds. That's how big we were at the time.
Yeah,
played at ground round restaurant.
The big deal was Wolfberg had parked his car in the city, but he just had to move it by 6 a.m. when the street washers came around. No sweat. That day, the actual day, not that week, not that year, that day, Wolfberg had gone in and resigned as a teacher because he was going to do comedy full time.
All right, Jackie, I was there. I was there for this, right?
So Peter can rubber stamp the story. The car breaks down. It stops. The radiator's overheating. We actually walked off the highway and went to somebody's house and asked if we could get some water out of the hose. I mean, can you imagine doing that today? You'd get your head blown off. Somehow we called, and they came from the club to pick us up. We went back and did the show, and one of the waitresses said, look, my brother can fix cars. Stay the night at my house. Not sexually. Like her and her brother were there at the show. She was working. You can stay overnight at my house, and tomorrow my brother will fix your car, and you can go home. And I'm like, that's fine. But Wolfberg had to get back to the city because he moved his car. They would tow his car, which would have been like $300, which was like 2 months' salary. So I'm with this girl and her friends. We got a carload of girls, and we take Bales and Wolfberg and drop them off at the corner of Route 22 and 3 that goes to New York City. It's like midnight. They get out, and they're standing on the side of the highway hitchhiking. And I'm drunk, and I'm laughing. I'm with the girls. I'm like, have a nice career. This is the life Wolfberg had chosen, and it was just storybook.
And Scott, I will never forget Dennis Wolfberg with his thumb out hitchhiking the evening of the day that he resigned his tenured teaching position, hitchhiking 3 o'clock in the morning to get home. And he looked at me and he said in his high, crazy voice, maybe I should reconsider my decision.
Well, it was a good choice in the long run, but I think that's a great story. Dennis was an accomplished teacher. Like you said, he had tenure. He was a lot of his material was about his teaching days, but he went on to, he's not famous, but for me, one of the more cherished comics I got a chance to work with, and he got a lot of TV, a lot of exposure, and in my mind, a very successful stand-up comic. Thanks for sharing. That's a great story.
Totally true, and 100% agreed. There was nobody like Dennis Wolfberg.
Yeah, we had great cons,
Yeah,
Love
that's
it.
so fun that we all got a chance to work with some of the same people. Now, I was just noticing, even in this phone conversation, you guys both get excited. You both are artistic talents, and we all know how much fun it is to be on the mic. You've started this podcast where you're sharing stand-up memories. Is it difficult to work as a team? Do you find yourself talking over each other? Have you found a
No,
pace?
When we do, it's on purpose. We're really good at passing the ball and staying out of the way. And, if I'm rude to him, it's not an accident. It's not that I'm I don't know enough not to break in. I'm like, well, to hell with him. I'm stepping on him here. Most shows start with me stepping on him. That's kind of like our Smothers Brothers thing,
Yeah, Scott, once in a while I get a word in edgewise, and I get so much satisfaction out of that. It really keeps me going to the next show.
Well, I got to tell you, I've really enjoyed the shows. And ladies and gentlemen, I've already plugged it, but I want to keep doing it. It is available on the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, but check out Standup Memories with Jackie and Peter. It's an amazing podcast. Now, how did the idea of doing a podcast come about? Because you obviously are friends. You've had a similar past in this history, in this great industry we call stand-up. How did the podcast come about?
So I knew I should always do a podcast, and there's this great studio, Tied in Media. They had just started a studio, and they wanted a flagship podcast. And I knew these guys. The guys are a really huge charity organization called pinktie.com. It's really interesting. They get these huge pink ties, and they get every celebrity in the world to sign them, and then they auction them off, and people spend a fortune. Everybody tries to come up with a different tack for making money for comedy. So they asked me if I wanted to do a podcast, and I said sure. And I said, you know what? Do I really want to sit there and talk about myself? I said I really should talk to somebody. And I thought, well, Peter and me work together all the time. It was his fault that I wound up at the comic strip. He dragged me in there. Bales, you want to be a guest on my podcast? And he came, and we did like a couple hours. And I said, we should do this together. We did 25 shows before we had a guest.
Wow.
We just yacked and yacked and yacked because one thing led to another. And we weren't forcing it. It was just flowing,
Well, that's what happens with friends, that have a similar past and lots of great stories, is you are able to gel as a team. You mentioned Abbott and Costello. I mean, there's some truth to that. There's a certain chemistry that works. Not everybody can do that.
Well, I'll step in. It's really true, Scott. I was Jackie's first guest on his podcast that didn't even have a name yet. And at the end of that session, I became the co-host. He just said, hey, you want to be co-host? Let's do this together. And as I say, the rest is history.
Well, that was a good move.
We finally interviewed a couple comedians. Then we got the bright idea to have a comedian and his wife. Then we had a female comedian and her husband. And then we had some young comics. We're playing around with it. But, we just keep it loose. And, the idea is to be funny, not to get deep. We don't want to know if your father tortured you with a tire iron as a kid. We want to know.
It's so funny you say that, because as a podcaster, I have 3 different podcasts. They're all pure entertainment, but it's always funny because when you're dealing with the industry, they want to know, well, what are you doing to save people? What are you doing to, bring about a better world? And I'm like, fuck that. I'm just here to make people laugh.
Moron. What the world needs now is to laugh, not to talk about what's wrong. What would solve everything is everybody relax and laugh a little bit. That's why I don't care about the whole politically correct. Am I insulting the girl? Am I insulting the Jewish guy? It's got if anybody can't tell that what I'm doing or Peter's doing is surely is purely just to make somebody smile and laugh. I mean, there's nothing more valuable than that. And if and people have the ass for that, well, go home and be depressed. Just leave me alone.
Scott, the bottom line is, Shakespeare said the play's the thing. Well, Jackie and I say the laugh is the thing, and we're just having fun, and we want the audience to have fun. It's that simple. It really is.
Well, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head. It is all about entertainment. That we're in that business. It is show business that we have to do some work around it, but it is about just entertaining and trying to take people's minds off what all the crap going on in the world. What do you guys as a team feel like the best part of the podcast is? Is it interacting with yourselves, having the interviews and the guests? What's really making it exciting and fun for you guys?
I'm going to stop you right there. The minute you start talking about comedy, and what do you think is the funny part? That's when it ceases to be comedy. That's like somebody telling me, what do you think is the best part of the joke? The setup or the middle or it's just an experience. There's no like, I really look forward to the beginning. I really look forward to the ending. You got to enjoy just the whole entity, the whole thing. There's no we don't have segments like where we're all of a sudden we play 5 questions or what's your favorite food. We don't do any of that crap, you know.
Well, I just meant that you guys have your own thing going between the two of you, but you've also been doing some interviews. Has that been something that's added that extra set of value to you? Are you having fun with the interviews?
But we are. We totally are. The interviews are terrific. And Jackie and I are developing a chemistry and a flow. And it's not like we're sitting down and deliberately trying to do it. It's just happening. But Scott, you ask a great question. You know, what is it about podcasting that makes it valuable, that makes it fun, that makes it something you want to do? It's because we just had fun doing that. And you know what? Next time, it could be even better. Yes, again, it's very simple, but there's always the chance the next time will be better and more fun. And that's why I love podcasting. If you can do it with a fellow like Jackie and share memories with your audience that also has similar memories, well, you know, then I think we've hit on something.
You're connecting with the audience.
What's the best part? It's like if I have Southern fried chicken and somebody says, "What's your favorite food?" I'll say steak. And if I had steak the night before and they say, "What's your favorite food?" I'll say Southern fried chicken. You look forward to what's coming, you know. Like if we did a show with a couple of guests, I'll be looking forward to the next show where it's just me and Peter shooting the breeze. You know, the variety and things being passed around. Like we had a guest comic, but then the next show was the comic and his wife. You know, so the changing up of everything keeps it fresh and keeps us on our toes. You know,
well, variety is king. I mean, that's true. That you want to. I think you put it really well. That we're looking forward to that next adventure. What will the next conversation bring to the audience that maybe didn't happen in this conversation? And it's really almost a risk, but it's an adventure on what entertainment value can I pull out of this next conversation. And I think that that's really important. I mean, the reason I do a podcast is that I want to share my love for this industry and all the great connections I've made over the decades, and bringing that stand-up comedy to virtually a new audience. I mean, I had thousands and thousands of people through my comedy clubs and concerts and TV shows, but the podcast 40 years later, 30 years later, the audience now is different. So you get a chance to reinvigorate that connection between the audience and stand-up comedy. Now, we talked briefly about how all three of us think that the comedy audience has changed, not so much stand-up comedy. As a comedy club owner, I've seen thousands of shows, produced thousands of shows, and now in my senior years, I don't go out to stand-up comedy. I don't seem as engaged and interested in this generation of stand-up comics, and I kind of beat myself up over that. Have you guys gone to shows? Have you watched
That's got nothing to do with you. That's got everything to do with, you know, been there, done that. What are you going to do, start over? I can't even tell you a popular song since the album Chicago 2 in 1969.
I think the Rolling Stones are the best band in the world. You know,
people say, who's your favorite new comic? I'll say Chris Rock. You know, you know.
Yeah, but the truth is, you know, I'm still out in the clubs, and I do teach a comedy class here on Long Island called Standup University. There's a great title, Standup University. And yes, there are exciting new young people out there. But again, comedy is always difficult to do. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But you do see new comics, more and more women. That's a good thing about modern day comedy. More and more women. And once in a while, there is somebody who comes along who's really, really special.
Yeah, I was trying to engage with the new comics, and Barry Neal, who runs an agency in LA, hooked me up with 3 young new comics, and I did a comedy roundtable with them. And I found it fascinating because as an art form, the basics of stand-up is the same. You know, you have an opening, your middle, your punchline, your closer, whatever. The setup of a joke is the same.
Yeah.
However, the audience and the mentality has to stay generational. It has to stay current to connect with today's audience. And I think that's where I find it interesting. I still really enjoy the guys that we came up the ranks with in the 80s and 90s. And yet there's some really, like you said, funny people coming out here in 2023 that have that ability to connect with an audience. It's the same process, but the material, the direction feels different. How do you feel on that?
100% agree. Very well said. Topic, premise, punchline. All right? The topic is the broad subject you're talking about. The premise is your special take on that subject. And the punchline is that twist or surprise that makes the audience laugh. It is the same process, but you have to keep it updated. I mean, nobody is interested today in another Jack Nicholson impression.
That's actually a great reference. That's so true.
How many times did we hear that in the 80s? Got back from the Feds being down south, and boy, are those people backwards. You hear that stuff a million times. Now, an overdone topic and premise is the colonoscopy. If I hear another comic doing a routine about a colonoscopy, I'm going to pass out.
Because you write what you know.
Target goes from I can no longer get 3 erections a night to past the enema. You know what I mean? It's times change.
Well, and that leads me to my second to last question for you guys, and thank you so much for being here. It's been a hoot, but there is especially after COVID, there's some more stages being made available for stand-up comedy. And I think, Peter, you said you're still hitting a few stages, or you guys have any interest in doing shows? Do you still go out and perform?
Yes, we're both out all the time. I do clubs, and Jackie's all over the place. Some of the best times when Jackie and I are together. I love it. We go great together.
I always tell people I'm retired until the phone rings. The last couple of months, I do shows like Peter opens a show and I close the show, and we're doing it all over. I don't do the thing where you go out for 3 days or go out for a week in this club and a week to that club. I usually drive to the show and come back, unless it's like 2 shows in one place, and maybe I'll go and stay overnight, but very rarely. But still doing them all the time. After a couple of weeks, you start to twitch because you haven't gotten a laugh. So we still love doing them. And it's funny because I'm well known enough that my audience has gotten older with me. So I'll do a show and people are still roaring at what I do because they've grown up with me. My audience isn't 25 years old. They're like the people from the Stern Show that were listening. I was already old. I was like, 50 years old at the height of the Stern Show, but the audience was like 20, 30, 40. So all those people know what I do and they've moved along. And now I picked up a whole boatload of kids that know my stuff from the internet, so
that's really cool. Peter,
you don't change, they change with you,
Right. Yeah. Right. They mature with you. The audience goes along with you. Peter, where do you like to perform, and are you doing kind of the old stuff? You trying to write new stuff?
Well, I joke around about I'm doing the same act I did in 1983, but I'm messing around with my order to keep it fresh. But that's actually
that works.
Yeah, that's a joke. You're always trying to add new stuff, adding new stuff and taking out the old stuff. That's a continual lifetime process if you're a lifer like I am, and you have to do it before a live audience. It's not like music where you can practice at home alone. You need an audience to practice and grow, and getting stage time is the most difficult thing, as you know, for comics that are starting out. I'm very fortunate that I have a career that I can have a lot of connections and continue to work out there at all kinds of events. and continue to change it up and grow and try new things. It's every comedian. I don't care if you're doing it a week or you're doing it 50 years. You've got a new joke. It's in your head, and you want to work the material. And when's my next show? Doesn't matter how long you've been doing it.
You know, I usually have a pretty good sized crowd, and sometimes they'll stick a young guy in front of me and say, all right, do 10 minutes. But you can't get them off the stage because these young kids are so used to working to 10 or 15 people. And all of a sudden they got 250 people that are laughing at everything they said. They're like they died and went to heaven, and I can't blame them. They're like, oh, let me bathe in this a little bit, you know. Me, I don't change up anything. My girlfriend yells at me because I do the same jokes. But I tell people, I'm not doing stand-up comedy, and I'm not trying to on the Johnny Carson show. I'm doing Hamlet. I'm doing a performance. You know, if you go to see Hamlet, you don't expect the guy to get up there and change it the next night. I'm performing something, and you either do it well or you do it horribly.
And Scott, I got to tell you, I opened for Mark Twain. And if it worked back then for me, it's still working now.
Well, you guys have you got a great history. You have a great view on stand-up comedy as an art form, and I think you guys both shared some important information there. So anybody in the audience that's interested in being in stand-up comedy, that is great advice and so true. It's all about getting in front of an audience, and even at our age, getting the laughs is what is still gets our endorphins going, gets our adrenaline going, and gives us a reason to get up every day.
100% agree. Comedy is welcome. Stand-up comedy is welcome to everybody. It doesn't matter how old you are, where you're from, your race, your ethnicity, your religion. Everybody is welcome.
Well, it is incredible. Now, you guys have this great podcast, Standup Memories, starring Jackie Martling and Peter Bales. I got to tell you, you have an assistant or producer, Michael Zinn.
Yes, Michael Zinn. We love Michael Zinn.
He is amazing to work with. His communication skills are there, and it would just be sure to pass on to him. He helped make this easy, and it was a pleasure to work with him. So Michael Zinn has put these guys on the map with their new podcast. What would you tell my audience the best way to find Stand-Up Memories and more about each of you individually?
It's standupmemories.com. That's the website, and that is all the links to all the different, what do you call them, Peter? Platforms?
Yeah, platform. Where if you like audio only, we're on all the platforms, and of course you can see us on YouTube. Standupmemories.com.
Yeah, and there's all three, well, all 2 seasons, and the third season's just starting to get loaded. And there's like a couple of, there's like a little paragraph about each show, so you can see what it's all about. Pass the word. One thing I want to plug is they did a documentary on me that was done just before the pandemic hit, and finally the things are starting. We all know things are just starting to come back to somewhat normal, and we finally got it distributed. So it's called Joke Man. Just 2 words, Joke Man, and the slug line is, "You haven't heard this one." And it's an hour and a half, and it's just a fun thing about my life. And if you like jokes, you like show business, it's fun. But the podcast, we love people, and we're really not getting communication from people as much as we'd like. I think we're going to start asking people to write in, because you run into people in bars and restaurants, and they say, "Oh, I have a question." All right, well, call in, call up, send it in. Because I always loved on any show where they say, "Oh, we got a letter from Harry asking, is Peter really that weird?" You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Well, I want all my audience to know that I'm very proud to say Stand-Up Memories, the podcast, is now available on the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network. So you can find it there as well, or go to their website. What about the university, Comedy University?
Oh, yes.
Plug that.
We do not have a football team, but Stand-Up University, standupuniversity.com. It's here on Long Island. We've had people come from quite a distance to attend our classes. we help people to get started. That first 6-7 minutes, your first show can be very traumatic, and we provide a positive atmosphere to do what you've always wanted to do. So just do it. Go to standupuniversity.com. I also want to plug that I'm going to be at Pizza Hut in a couple weeks. If they like my tape, I had to send in a tape. I hope they like it.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Peter, how did you get the gig?
Well,
Hey, one more thing. I got hundreds of jokes on TikTok, Scott. And it's really funny because TikTok has to be clean. And you will be amazed at how filthy a joke can be, how filthy a joke you can tell if you don't tell it, with dirty words. I've got jokes on there that would make people's ears curl, but they've gotten through. And it's TikTok.com/@Jackie Martling. And if you go, there's over 200 jokes. And I actually have a joke that's gotten 1.1 million views.
Well, what joke is it? Don't leave us hanging.
Yeah.
Well, you want me to tell it to you the way I had to tell it to get it over on the thing?
No, any way you want. This is a podcast.
The guy's buying a used motorcycle from his cousin, and he goes to pick it up, and he says to his cousin, "My God, man, your motorcycle, it's so shiny. It's like new. What's your secret?" And his cousin says, "Well, whenever it's about to rain, I have a tube of Vaseline, and I coat the chrome with a little Vaseline, and that way it doesn't tarnish and it doesn't rust. In fact, you're taking my motorcycle. I don't need the tube of Vaseline. Here, you take it." He hands it to his cousin, and he buys the motorcycle. So the guy's going to pick up his girlfriend. He's been going out with her for a few weeks. He's going to pick her up on his new motorcycle, and they're going to go to dinner at her parents' house for the very first time. So he picks her up, and she gets on the back of the motorcycle, and on the way, she says, "I think I should tell you something. My family is really weird. You can't talk during dinner. Because talk during dinner, you got to do the dishes." He thinks, all right, what the hell? And they get to the girl's house, and the whole front lawn is full of dirty dishes. Kind of weird. And they go up the stairs, and on the porch, all dirty dishes. They go in the living room, the stairs, there's filthy, dirty. They haven't done the dishes in months. What the hell? So they sit down to dinner, and they're sitting there at dinner, the whole meal, nobody talks. So at the end of the meal, and he's getting a little horny, and he figures nobody's going to say anything, so he takes his girlfriend and lies her on the dining room table and strips her down, and he bangs her. And nobody says nothing. So he looks over, and her mother's kind of cute. He figures nobody's going to say anything, so he takes her mother, he pushes her off the table and lies her mother on a table and undresses her, and he starts banging her mother. Nobody says nothing. Then he looks out the window and he sees it starting to rain on his motorcycle. He reaches in his pocket and he takes out the tube of Vaseline. And the father jumps up and says, all right, I'll do the dishes.
That's a great story. Oh, that's hilarious.
Oh, my God. That is
1.1 million views.
Well, you guys
don't make a nickel from it, but it's fun,
Right. You guys have been such a treat to have on the podcast. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you, Peter. This has been a real honor to have you on this comedy roundtable and getting a chance to talk about our kind of shared history in this art form that we all three love. And really appreciate you sharing your stories, your jokes, and all about your new podcast, Standup Memories, with my audience. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Peter.
You know what? I got one request. I always say this every time we do a podcast, because people always have so many questions about, have you heard this joke, or did this really happen on the Stern Show, et cetera, et cetera. I always give out my email address, and people email me, and I actually, I have a guy that answers all my email, me. So I tell people to email me. My email is very simple. It's jokeland@AOL.com. JOKELAND@AOL.com. And I get emails from, people I haven't seen in 30 years, 40 years. I didn't know what happened to you. Where'd you go? You work in California, and you work in Denver, and you work in Texas, and people have no idea what, the whole world wasn't tuned into the Stern Show, so I just wanted to mention that. Jokeland at AOL.com. And thanks. We'll do this anytime, right, Pete?
Oh, absolutely. Scott, this has been terrific. You're great. We loved it.
Well, thank you guys very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to the show. Hope you had as much fun as I did. We'll be back next week with another great show. Jackie, Peter, it's been wonderful. Thanks for joining us.
All right.
You got it.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Thanks for listening. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.